Perfect, thank you, sorry.
No worries, we're now recording. All right, so before I get started, I want, so at the end of this presentation, I'm gonna ask that everybody do one thing, and that is really to consider how your organization can adopt one resilient building technique into your operations this year. So really, as I'm talking about some of these techniques, really thinking about what can work for you and your organization, and what you can do to adopt something this year. So let's dive in. Oh, see if I can get it to advance. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start with a story related to resilient building, just to kind of place some like people impact to why resilient building is important. So SVP developed 30 duplexes in New Orleans. We completed construction on all of them last year. That's what you see on the screen here is one of them. And these homes are rentals for folks who are lower to moderate income. So they're affordable rentals. And they were built to the Fortified Gold standard, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So they were built to Fortified Gold. So going above and beyond what kind of standard construction or building code requires of us. And so when Hurricane Ida came through that region in August of last year, our residents were really fortunate, and us as an organization were really fortunate that none of these homes, all 30 of these duplexes, none of them withstood any sort of severe wind or rain damage from that hurricane. So we saw some minor like shingles being removed from roofs, but nothing that impacted those who were living in the home. And so I think that really just speaks to the investment that was made during construction to make these homes more resilient so that those who are living in it are less disrupted whenever there is severe weather coming through their area. This is a prime example of how folks who are living in homes that are built more resiliently can kind of, continue to live, as normal as a life as possible after a severe weather event comes through their area. So I wanted to share that so you can kind of hear the direct impact of resilient building has on those who live in those buildings. So as represented on this chart that we see on the screen here, we all know that extreme weather events are becoming more costly. They're becoming more frequent across our country. It's important to point out on this graphic that it only reflects billion-dollar events. And so not any of those smaller events that we all still know are quite damaging and can be severe and impacting. So since we know that there's this reality of severe weather happening more frequently and the severity of it's just continuing to increase, that's where resilient building really comes in. And why it's important. So what is resilient building? When I think about resilient building, I think about construction techniques or the way that a home is designed that promote its ability to really adapt and recover pretty quickly after there's some sort of disturbance, such as severe rain or a tornado, events like that. And so it's important because recovery is a lot quicker and a lot less costly for the owner of the home, for the community as a whole. And it also gives peace of mind to those who are living in the structure. Like I just talked about that story on the last slide. Those who are living in those homes that are built more resiliently kind of can be a little bit more at peace that their home is going to be able to withstand these types of events. And so we can't obviously stop damaging weather events from occurring. That's just, we can't do that. But what our organizations can do is really take control and take ownership over our response and how our own resources, such as the homes we're building and the people who are living in them and how they are impacted. And so that's where we should all be focusing our energy, is what can we do in the community and for the homes that we are all kind of repairing or rebuilding. I'd love, the first moment to kind of get some engagement here, I'd love to just kind of get an understanding from the group for folks who feel comfortable sharing using the chat, coming off of mute, an idea of what your organization currently incorporate resilient best practices into your construction projects. And so I kind of broke it down ABCD here. I'd love for folks to chime into the chat or come off of mute and share. That would be great. No, wrong answer here, obviously. I'm seeing someone is saying close to 80%. Go ahead, Roy.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, obviously we tried to do exterior, first and, dry in the house, obviously first. I guess the question for me is the definition isn't quite clear yet from your perspective. So I don't know if we're talking about the same thing. I hope we're doing at least 50%. But until I understand the definition further, I'm not sure I can answer the question as directly as I want to.
Yeah, so maybe I could try to chime in on that. So I think resilient building isn't there, from my perspective, there's not this checklist that you must do in order to build resiliently. I think there are pieces, which I'm going to go over some examples of techniques for resilient building. There are lots of different options when we think about resilient building. And so it may not be from top to bottom, making sure every single feature in the home is built resiliently, but picking and choosing pieces such as installing a fortified roof. That's a resilient technique. So I would consider that home built resiliently. Or doing new construction, for example, elevating a home appropriately. Example techniques, I'm not thinking of resilient building things in order to say I build resiliently. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Dolce, one of the things that I think responds to your question, we're actually working on a house now. First of all, the restoration team, we do not build homes, we repair homes. Mm-hmm. And we are at a site now where we're repairing damaged siding and the lady's porch, front porch, back porch. It's all wood construction built up to the side of the house. And what has happened over a period of years is, the tight fit between the decking and her house has created wood rot to the extent of the foundation is failing on her. So as we rebuild the decking, we're putting additional flashing and taking other measures to keep the water, to vent the water away from the house. So we always look at those type things, what caused the problem, and can we not just fix it, but what can we do to prohibit this from happening, or at least delay the inevitability of failure of wood materials.
Yep, John, that's a perfect example. Yep.
Didn't New Orleans take some of that information and put it into their building code? I know during Katrina that's whenever I was first introduced to hurricane clips that they were putting onto all the studs of all the houses there, and it got put into effect as part of their code for their housing. Is there any plans, or do you know of, that they're going to push the fortified roof and the raising? And I think they even brought in the raising of the electrical outlets. I think they moved it from 15 inches up to 24, but I can't remember. That's been, I was a young guy then. I'm an old guy now, so I can't remember that.
Oh, is my internet connection failing?
Yes.
Was a little bit. Okay.
Well, maybe try, if you shut your video, sometimes that helps. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, give me 1 second.
Did y'all hear me or no?
Oh yeah, we can hear you, Kevin. Yeah.
Oh,
thank
okay.
you.
All right. Okay. All right.
You have great service wherever you're driving through.
In between Lafayette and New Iberia.
Okay, so hopefully just let me know if it goes out again. Sorry about that, guys. Kevin, yes, and you're speaking to something I'm going to talk about here in a couple of slides that, yeah, most local building codes incorporate various resilient measures that are appropriate to the area. I think when the question comes in is, are we following those local building codes? If we're not required to pull a permit for the projects that we're doing, how much of those building codes are we incorporating? And so spot on, Kevin, that those codes do have some added resiliency measures built into them. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and just holler, Angela, if my internet goes out again. All right, so we're gonna get into a couple examples of resilient building techniques. Like I said, there are tons of different options, or we call them techniques when it comes to resilient building. Some that are geared towards new construction, which I tried to stay away from a lot of those since I know most of us are doing repair work. And then there's some that are better suited for repair type projects. And so I'm just going to walk through a couple of examples that are more of an easy lift maybe than others, just to kind of get us all thinking about different techniques. So these techniques that I'm going to go talk about really vary from being low cost, low lift to some that are a little bit more costly and a little bit more involved. And so, like I said, as I'm like I said earlier, as I'm reviewing these techniques, I welcome folks to continue to chime in with your own experience as it may relate to any of these options. We definitely learn best from those around us who've done similar work before. At homes, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems are, as we might be aware of, are some of the most costly to repair or replace. And so flooding events, for example, as like low as 12 inches of water into the home or around the home, can really destroy that critical infrastructure and cause us to have to repair or really replace those features of the home. And two ways that can be mitigated is, one is to elevate electrical outlets higher than what is expected of electrical outlets to be installed. And so this is really based on in your area, what is that base flood elevation? What is the likelihood of the height of flooding to happen in that area? And just installing those electrical outlets above that base flood elevation to prevent, if flooding were to occur, to prevent those outlets ideally from being impacted by that flooding. It's one less kind of cost that has to come out of addressing repairs post floods. And while it might be kind of visually a little unique to have those electrical outlets higher, important to just emphasize that the reason that you are doing this or that you're considering doing this is really long-term impacts on resiliency for that home and that owner. Another example is as you can see on the photo on the right, is elevating equipment such as your compressors for your HVAC systems. Oftentimes these are placed on the ground or just on like a small, 4 to 6 inch elevated platform. If your home that you're repairing and you're providing a new HVAC system for example, is vulnerable to floodwaters, it's likely that that compressor is then going to be destroyed if that area is flooded. And so by elevating them onto or raising them onto elevated platform, again, you're reducing that future risk and future cost in the event that there is another repetitive flooding event in that particular area. Any comments or input from the group here? All right. Let's move on. So any opening to your home, such as doors, including garage doors and windows, are soft spots to high wind weather events. Once a home or door is compromised, it really invites wind and water to into the interior of your home, and that's going to cause even greater damage than if that window or door stayed intact. And so there are two resilient approaches that I'm going to talk about here in regards to protecting windows that are most commonly used. And one is installing impact resistant windows, and the other is storm shutters. Impact resistant windows are beyond standard code in most cases. While these windows are higher cost than a traditional kind of window, I guess you can call it, continuing to keep in mind that these resiliency measures are a long-term investment. So the upfront cost maybe more, but if you think about kind of over many years, how this investment is going to secure that particular home. And then the second is storm shutters. So storm shutters come in kind of all shapes and sizes, and these can be used to protect windows from that flying debris, hail, or other sort of obstructions that can potentially cause kind of an opening to be destroyed or damaged. Unrelated to resiliency, but something to keep in mind as it pertains to windows that I want to just point out, or maybe folks are aware of, is that the construction industry is still experiencing supply chain issues due to the pandemic. May not be a surprise to any of y'all, but I just want to take a moment to point that out. And so you need to keep that in mind when you're planning for projects and preparing timelines as it relates to specifically windows, and in your areas there may be other material challenges that you're aware of. And so, for example, in SBP's experience, we've seen that windows are taking anywhere from 3 to 6 months to arrive once we place that order. And so there are a couple of things that you can consider as a workaround with this delay. And one is to, ordering windows well in advance of when you may need them, as well as if you're able to ordering in bulk. If you're able to front those costs and store those extra materials, you'll be able to help contribute to lower delays for your individual construction projects. And the last thing we'd kind of suggest that folks consider is to retrofitting the dimension of the opening for those windows to fit a standard window, rather than trying to order custom or non-traditional window sizes. So when you're doing window replacements for your repair projects, how do we make sure that we're trying to utilize the most standard size window to make it kind of easier for you and your construction teams to get the materials you need quicker than maybe you would if there was a custom size needed. What thoughts or questions or input from personal experience do folks have here?
I had a question on that. As far when that goes into replacing the windows and kind of stuff like that with the SBP, whenever we get back ordered on things like that, do y'all take into consideration on a time limit if all the material has been bought, it just hasn't been put in, or how is that handled in that kind of situation?
Angela, do you want to answer that as it pertains to the grant, since I'm not familiar what kind of how you guys monitor timelines?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all in pretty good communication. So I would say, as long as you're communicating, we ordered this 2 months ago. We bulk ordered everything. We did everything right to get it here. Assuming for our grantor, we can extend your own due dates, then we can talk about it. Yeah. I mean, I know there's just some things out of our control at this point. So as long as we're in good touch about it and I have the flexibility to, delay end dates for you all, then yeah, just communicate that to me and we can make it work. But I know it's tricky. I know in New York, somebody was trying to order windows the other day and it was like a 4 to 6 month turnaround to order windows. And they instead just went to Lowe's, got whatever size they had, and then just retrofitted the hole to make it work, which I honestly think is like the better option. But yeah, so we can talk about it, but I'm definitely open to it.
Anybody else? All right, let's keep moving. A couple of last examples of resilient building techniques before we get into fortified is one, thinking about the decor finishes on the interior of your home. These are interior building features are for things that frequently must be removed and replaced in water-related weather events such as flooding. So the types of flooring that we all likely typically see being ripped out of homes after floods are carpet and laminate, which is why here we would recommend for y'all to consider, if you're not already, vinyl plank flooring or tile flooring. So these two flooring types are more resistant to water damage. And so unlike windows and elevated mechanical systems, homeowners may have more of an opinion on the style of flooring installed. They may have a preference, but keeping in mind that it's our responsibility as the service provider to educate those who we are serving and have standards in place that what we will and will not offer, not because we are just kind of like sticklers and don't kind of care to take the owner's opinion in mind, but because it allows us to, in this particular instance, provide the owner with a interior feature that's going to be more, again, resilient and less likely for them to have to tear out and replace again if their home is flooding again. So to emphasize that here, limiting options that you give homeowners to choose from or don't give options at all. And the reason for this is, like I said, to really allow your organization to focus on standardizing your process, be more efficient in your services, to be able to provide that repetitive quality service offering to those that are benefiting from your programs. This ties into TPS best practices, which I know Angela spoke briefly about in the session last week, and I believe she's going to be providing some further training in the coming weeks. So I just wanted to take a moment to plug that here. And the last general note, which we kind of spoke about at the beginning, I want to make on resiliency standards is pertaining to building codes. So while building codes in some areas might not be the most recent or updated, they're still backed in research and incorporate standards that will protect our homeowners from a wide range of disaster or hazards that are specific to your area. And like I mentioned, while you may not be required to pull a building permit, and so you may not be required to get those inspections by local city officials they're monitoring your work against a local building code. It's important to establish some of those best practices that are found in local building codes as it pertains to resiliency. I'm going to pause again to see what questions. I see Sonia raised her hand. You want to chime in here?
Yeah, just a question on the flooring. So from the funder's perspective, I guess this question is coming to you. In the past, the funders that we've worked with have not been open to upgrades to products. We're only in there to replace what was there. So we're there to make repairs, not remodels necessarily. So if they had a laminate floor or if they had carpet, we've been replacing it with laminate or carpet. We kind of look at upgrading to some of these other materials as just that, an upgrade. So from SBP's perspective, is if we're upgrading materials to make the home more resilient, is that acceptable? Or are we still looking at replacing with your funding? We'll focus on yours. Is it still more of a replace with like for like funding?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Dulcie. I can jump into if you want.
Mhm.
I mean, I think it's a really delicate balance, and that's a fantastic question. I think generally our grants are going to cover like for like, unfortunately, but where applicable or where we have these resilient, like fortified grants and some of our more unrestricted grants, then I think it's something that we can build into MOUs and applications. But generally, it's going to be like for like. I mean, if you can sub in easily like ceramic floor instead of, you know, whatever they had there, some like vinyl or something, and the cost, if you can buy it in bulk and you can keep the cost down because you're going to use volunteers to do it, although that's like a lot of management. But if you can keep costs down and do something like a ceramic swap instead of what they had before, then that's fine. But I mean, yeah, but it's very tricky, and it depends on, like, you know, the area, if it's like ground level or below grade, like you want to figure out what you should be doing versus what you can kind of afford to be doing.
Gotcha.
But, yeah,
Well, that makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. If they flooded 3 times already,
Right,
we're replacing laminate 3 times.
right,
then
and
it would have been more cost effective to replace it with tile.
right,
Mhm.
and not carpet. I mean, I've seen basements with carpet like all the time, and it's crazy, but
Yeah.
stuff like that I think are easy enough. Yeah.
Okay.
So Angela, are you looking at all in cost, meaning materials and labor? For instance, if we could do some type of an upgrade from carpet to something more water resilient, but use volunteer labor for installation, do you take that into consideration?
I think we do take it into consideration. I would say most of it's going to be on a case by case basis.
Okay.
But it's going to all be around like what's going to be most affordable, but also more like sustainable, because
Okay.
we want to make sure that it's sustainable repair, but also low to mid-grade material. I mean, we purchase mid-grade material. We don't purchase like the worst of the worst, but also obviously not like the upgrades, like kind of Sonia was saying. But yeah, if you have carpet down there, then we'll be supportive of you swapping that out for ceramic. And if you can use volunteers to keep the cost down, if you have I know some of you have in-house construction team members, which is great. If you have skilled volunteers like the Mennonites, they can do tiling real easily. So I think it depends, but yeah, I would say we're supportive of that.
Thank you.
Toy had her hand up too. I wanted to just see what your question is, Toy. Hey.
Hi, y'all. Thanks. Yeah, I'm wondering what people's experience with who've been doing this recovery work longer than our group has, what their experience is with mold growth under vinyl plank or tile flooring. And also, I just want to say, I know vinyl plank is the kind of the industry standard, but it is made of PVC, which is a terrible plastic product.
Where are you?
Landfills.
What group are you from? Because I don't think you put it in the chat.
I'm sorry, Louisiana Just Recovery Network, or also frequent, our fiscal sponsor is Healthy Golf. New Orleans, we're serving St. John, St. James, and some St. Charles parishes.
So this is
Yeah, go ahead.
Anita. We've had a lot of experience with the waterproof flooring. I don't know if anybody else has done the plank installations, and it's been great. We even had a house flood due to a plumbing issue, and the flooring held up very well.
What about in terms of mold growth underneath the flooring?
Well, we did have a floor that we had to take up due to some moisture. It was a combination of things. There was some mold, but the mold never rose up to the surface. It stayed under the underlayment. So there was mold present, but it just, the vinyl planking, because it seals in, it did not allow it to come up to the surface.
Thanks.
Roy, did you also have a question or comment?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to say, Angela, if the grant or requirements aren't stated, I mean, then we're gonna follow, I mean, specifically about like for like or whatever. I mean, so far I haven't seen that, at least in the one grant that we used for the winter storm. So we have a practice of, max cost per square foot that we utilize, which had been $2 a square foot. Obviously, we're reevaluating that as prices go up, but and we typically can find, vinyl and tile options for under that value, and try to replace. So this is one thing we do try to do as much as possible. So I guess I was just going to ask, I mean, are there unstated requirements in grant, or is they should be specifically stated if it's like for like or not, right?
It's not stated on purpose, because I mean, we rely on you guys to have your best judgment there. And I know your grant is very unrestricted, as long as it's for obviously winter storm specific repairs. The grant, and we use, we rely on you guys. We do require or encourage everybody to have 2 bids, unless you have some volunteer labor, and we're just purchasing in-kind donations with our funds. So there's just like that kind of conversation, but it's not stated, I think, intentionally. But maybe that's something we need to do. I mean, if that would be helpful, to make it really specific of what materials you can use, what replacement can be, I don't know, used instead of some other material, then maybe we just need to make that clearer for folks, which is really good feedback for me. So I appreciate that, Roy.
No problem. I just want to say that we'll use our stand, if it's not. So.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah.
Anybody else before we move on to Fortified? Okay. All right. So I'm going to define Fortified for everybody. So as you can, I'm just going to read this for you. Fortified is a construction methodology that was developed by the Institute for Business and Home Safety, otherwise known as IBHS. And it's backed in research that they've done, tons of research that they've done on particular product types and installation techniques, with an end goal of really making structures, they have commercial and residential standards, more resilient to wind and wind-driven rain events. So to place a definition to what is fortified, that is what it is. And so we're going to talk about Fortified over these next couple of slides, related to, I know, the grant application that Angela sent out last week. We're going to hopefully touch on all the questions that were already sent in, but if we don't, we'll make sure we address any others at the end of that. So we'll try to hold any particular questions about Fortified and the grant until the end. We'll kind of make sure we make time for that. All right, so I'm going to show video, and we tested the audio before, so hopefully it works.
Year after year, severe storms along the coast and far inland prove just how vulnerable homes, businesses, and communities are when it comes to natural disasters. To help prevent further destruction, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, known as IBHS, created the Fortified programs. Specific design and construction standards give home and business owners options to better protect their buildings against hurricanes, hailstorms, low-level tornadoes, and severe thunderstorms. A strong quality control component ensures owners are getting the protection they deserve. There are several Fortified programs, all based on objective, science-based building techniques. This video focuses on the Fortified Home program, which addresses the natural hazard posing the biggest risk in a specific area. The construction standards can be used to build a new home or upgrade an existing home. Using data from more than 20 years of storm damage investigations in the field by IBHS and other experts, along with data from laboratory testing at the IBHS Research Center, Fortified Home provides a uniform set of superior building standards, standards that are stronger than most state building code requirements. Homeowners and builders work with Fortified Home evaluators throughout the construction or retrofitting process to make sure they achieve the desired level of disaster protection that best fits their budget. The roof, a home's first line of defense against Mother Nature, provides a comprehensive roof system designed to keep both wind and water out. A fortified roof features a wind-driven rain management system for advanced protection against water damage. It also provides superior wind uplift resistance by using ring shank nails, which provide double the strength of nails used on traditional homes. The silver level adds extra protection by strengthening building openings, such as windows and doors, to keep out wind, water, and flying debris. The gold level designation ensures the house is tied together and has what engineers call a continuous load path. This means the roof is tied to the walls are tied to the floors, and the house is tied to the foundation. The continuous load path helps the home to stand strong when high winds try to tear it apart. After a certified third-party evaluator verifies all upgrades and critical construction details are complete, homeowners receive a designation certificate with a unique ID number that is valid for 5 years. Fortified Home provides cost-effective, consistent, and defined structural upgrades. These science-based construction practices reduce the risk of damage from extreme weather events and deliver meaningful value to homeowners. That is why Fortified has been endorsed by local, state, and federal government agencies and is being adopted by builders and contractors at all price points. For a complete description of Fortified Home benefits and requirements, visit disastersafety.org/fortified. Fortified works. It truly is the national standard for resilient construction.
All right. Let me get to the next slide. All right. As you saw in the video, or heard in the video, there are 3 levels of fortified: roof, silver, and gold. I'm going to briefly run through all of them, but want to emphasize that y'all should really focus your attention on fortified roof, because that is what the grant application that Angela sent out last week supports. So let's talk through the levels. Like I said, fortified roof is where we're going to focus this group under the SHARE grant application. And this solution solely focuses on the roof. It does that by requiring very specific shingle and sheathing standards that are based on research IBHS has done, a specific nailing pattern in regards to attaching the sheathing and shingles to the roof structure, and a sealed roof deck. This prescriptive approach to re-roofing is above and beyond what is typical. It uses more nails than you would typically see subcontractors use. The sealed roof deck is done in a way that you may not typically see. And so it's this approach, this fortified roof standard, is really very attainable for rebuild and repair, like re-roofing projects. So not specific or not kind of only relevant for new construction projects, which is important for this group since I know we're focusing on repair projects. Fortified silver incorporates everything from fortified roof, plus it minimizes damages from failure to those openings that we spoke about a few slides back, such as doors, windows, chimneys, and gables, as well as focusing on securing attached structures such as carports and porches. One part of meeting this particular standard, the fortified silver level, is installing those doors and windows with very specific resistance ratings based on the area that the home is located in. And then the last and highest is the gold standard. And this is best suited for new construction. So really likely not relevant to this group, but still want to point it out, is that it incorporates standards from roof plus silver, And then emphasizes, in addition to that, a continuous load path. And the continuous load path, it connects the structural frame of the house together from the roof to the walls, to the floors, to the foundation. So everything is tied together in the home. One thing I want to point out quickly is that you'll notice on this slide that there's 2 columns of standards, one for hurricane, one for high wind. We'll work with those of you who are awarded a grant to identify what standard your region falls under. Most folks, from what we're hearing where people are from, are going to fall into that hurricane standard, but we'll work with you to help you identify. There are some slight differences between hurricane and high wind, again, just based on the where you're doing your recovery work and the risks in that area based on research that IBHS has done. One of the questions y'all may be wondering is, now what? Like, how do I actually implement fortified building practices? So let's walk through some steps. First, it's important to have folks on your team and in your subcontractor pool who really know, understand, and are in a way have a passion for the fortified standard. There has to be buy-in from your labor force that they'll follow through with the program requirements in order to ensure that your projects are successful. So when you're identifying a roofing contractor, it's more than just handing over a checklist and saying, do this, good luck. We really, from our experience, you're going to need to be more hands-on than that. So our experience, we've had face-to-face reviews with our roofing contractors to go over with them what's required to meet the fortified roof standard to ensure that they understand, to ensure their commitment. You're really going to be relying on those subcontractors, or maybe if you have on-team construction members, to do the work. And so you want to, again, ensure that they are bought in, that they understand it, so that those projects in the end are able to successfully meet fortified roof standards. We'll talk about some training here shortly that's available, that can be offered in supporting this building of your team. In addition to having your roofer, your construction folks aware of and educated on fortified, you also need to select a fortified evaluator. And this person is going to serve as your compliance guru, I guess, to ensure that you are building and documenting to IBHS's requirements. These evaluators have gone through certification through IBHS and are deemed evaluators by their program. And so they are able to work with you to check and ensure that the roof is installed correctly and that documentation is gathered correctly, and act as the liaison between you and IBHS. These evaluators, they do charge a small fee for their services. And once this team is in place, that's when you can start construction and really get to work. Your evaluator, like I said, is going to be engaged throughout the building process to collect documentation, and documentation is really photos and specifications on the type of materials being used. Necessary for those fortified standards to be met, they need that documentation to help you get that official certification for your roof. And so lastly, if all goes smoothly with construction and documentation, your project, that particular address, is going to receive a fortified designation certificate. And this is a certificate that should be shared with the owner of the property, because they may be able to benefit from insurance premiums as a result of their home being built to resilience standards. And so that really, we're going to talk about it here in a moment, but really is going to vary location by location and insurance provider by insurance provider. But as you can help advocate for that, or work with the client for them to advocate for themselves to receive an insurance premium, that's going to go a long way for that particular owner. Talking about incentives, why this buildings or how this building style fortified is beneficial is one, it's peace of mind for the owner of the home and for you as the service provider, to know that this particular roof is going to be able to withstand high wind and wind-driven rain weather events. There are also some states that offer very specific financial incentives. And so, as you can see on the screen, there's 6 states that offer insurance discounts or tax credits, maybe even grants available to help offset the cost of upgrading to meet this standard or provide those money-saving opportunities if these standards are implemented. So if you're located in any of those states, I'm glad to kind of support you in identifying what services or what incentives may be available specifically across those states. And then there's what's called other incentives. So there are these eight states, as you can see on the screen, that that there are not specific fortified specific incentives in place in that state, but these states have incentives for resiliency measures. And so fortified is a resiliency measure. And so there's an opportunity possibly for these particular homeowners and projects that you're building resiliently or building to fortified more specifically. There could be incentives in these particular states through insurance for building to fortified. So again, for folks located in these regions, glad to kind of work with you for those who are awarded to identify what those options may be. And like I said on the last slide, it's really, as you can tell, unique state by state, what incentives may be available. And even further than that, unfortunately, it really also varies insurance provider by insurance provider. There's not across the board, every homeowner's insurance provider recognizes the same kind of resiliency measures or provides the same incentives. So it's very unique across every provider. When you're thinking about building the knowledge of your team and subcontractors that we spoke about a moment ago, do know that IBHS has trainings on fortified available. Speaking from my personal experience, these trainings are really high quality. They've put a lot of thought and work into creating trainings that are done well. They're engaging with built-in knowledge checks throughout. They're all done virtually, self-paced. And they really help, in addition to those documented kind of book of standards that folks should have access to it and read. This is a way to further ensure that your teams understand how to build to fortified. We want our teams to be set up to be successful. And this is one way that you can support them in being successful in their kind of fortified journey. And so do you want to make note about the opportunity for us to support them in this?
Yeah, I'll make a note here, and then Toy, I saw that you had your hand up, so I'll get to your question. So just found this out actually on Monday, so it's not going to be in the applications, unfortunately, but I want to announce it to everybody, and I'll put it in the email. For any groups that we do award fortified grants to, we also are going to be able to fund an official training for those groups and their subcontractors. So don't feel like this is your one and only time to learn all of this. Once the grants are awarded to each individual partner, those partners and their subcontractors will be eligible for a training through Fortified. Like Dulcie said, it's going to be virtual. And at the end, I think they provide a certificate to you and the subcontractors. So really it's a huge benefit, I think, to contractors. They can go and show that to other, agencies or homeowners even, and provide that service to them, which is, an incentive for them, because I would say not all subcontractors are super open-minded to learning, training new things. But for you also, it's a skill that you'll be able to incorporate long after this grant. So we're very excited to be able to provide that training to everybody that is awarded. But also Toy had a question, so let me see what your question is.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. That was one of my questions.
Great.
That's really great. thanks for providing that. I'm curious if I have two questions. Do you have a sense of when that could come together?
Yeah, so the grant application's not due until the end of April. I wanted to give people plenty of time to, think about it, talk to their subs, like get buy-in, and then submit like an appropriate application. So it would probably be sometime in May that we'll send out the awards. And then at that point, we'll get everybody set up with the training.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
The other question I had was that the evaluators in Southeast Louisiana, we only have like 3, and they're all in the North Shore or in Baton Rouge, which is, a good hour drive from the areas we're servicing. And so I was curious, I know the grant application does specify if you're able, to get evaluation, and I imagine that's why, but I wonder if y'all have talked about any kind of like solutions or ideas about how to fill that type of gap.
Yeah, that's a good question. Dulcie and I were just talking about it. So with the grant, we require you to work with an evaluator. And this is something that was at the end, but I'll just talk about it now. We require you to work with evaluator. I don't know geographic wise, like how the locations break out. Dulcie knows more about like where the evaluators are in reference to where you all are located. So I'll let her answer that part. But we do want everybody to work with an evaluator, but we are not required to pass and get the certification. If you don't have a proper nail pattern in one area, or there's a photo that's a little bit off and you can't get the certification, and it's not possible for you to go back and fix that, as long as you're making every good faith effort to get your certification for you and for the homeowner, that's what we're going to be looking for. And so the evaluator is there to kind of like walk you through it. So I think all of the states that you are all from, although I think everybody on here is from a state that I know of, should have evaluators there that can travel to you. But yeah, so we want you to have an evaluator to help you. And then if that person still can't get you to pass through to get the certification, then we can still reimburse for the funds that you spent on it. Dulcie, do you have any more context about the location of the evaluator? I know we talked about that the other day.
Yeah, I'll add 2 comments here. Is that so in Louisiana, and I think also in Florida, we've worked with evaluators who have been willing to travel to us because they don't live in New Orleans, and so they've been willing to travel to us to work. And so I'm sorry for the dog barking. You would be hopefully we'll all be surprised that these evaluators, most of them are aware. Sorry, one second, let me close the door real fast for the dog. Well, what I was saying is, I think hopefully we'll all be surprised that because there aren't, tons and tons and tons of evaluators available all across the country, those that are available, most of them are they want to provide this service. And so to some extent, they're willing to travel. So it's, even though they don't maybe live in the community that you're serving and they live maybe an hour outside of it, it's still worth it to ask them to travel within to your region that you're serving. And then another note that I'll make is as folks are awarded, and if we are kind of up against a wall and we're not able to find a evaluator to work with you in your area, SVP fortunately has a pretty close relationship with IBHS, and sometimes they are able to make kind of the special asks of evaluators to work with us in cases where we have not had success in getting someone to work with us. So we have some options to find those evaluators to work with us if they may not be physically located in our service areas.
I also just
Thanks,
threw
Sean.
in, oh, sorry. I just want to say one more thing too. It's really helpful if you are able to get an evaluator, if you can batch your projects so that the evaluators coming out to check on, 3 or 4 of them, maybe that's your whole grant is just 3 or 4 of them. Roofs only take a few days to do generally. So if you can plan it out so that it's in that same window, and then your evaluator, you just make it a little bit more worth the time, I think. So anyway, Rachel, go ahead, sorry.
Whoops. Couldn't find the button. I didn't have a question. I just realized I'd been talking in the chat and I hadn't identified what my organization is. I see some other familiar names, so just wanted to say that. Hi, everybody. This is amazing.
Awesome, thank you, Rachel.
Well, actually, I do have a question. Well, you know, my colleague and I have been texting in the background. We're just wondering, so usually we have our staff doing the work. We don't hire roofing contractors per se. We'll have roofing partners like the Mennonites, but to get a contractor, it's hard enough after a disaster to get a contractor to do other parts of a home rebuild, repair. To get a contractor with the credentials to, if you're going to go that route, you know, which I think the grant provides for either, or if you're going to try to get a contractor to do it, how hard are they to find? Are they plentiful in the Louisiana area? Not talking about the evaluators, but the contractors that can do this. That's it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Dulcie, do you want to get that?
Yeah, and then see, I think I understand your question, but so if I answer it and you're still like, that's not what I meant, just let me know. Rachel, if your group uses the Mennonites to do your roofing work, which I think is what you said, you most frequently do, you can get them, even though the Mennonites aren't, you know, contractors per se, you can still educate them on how to build to fortified, and they can do the fortified roof for you. So you don't have to find a roofer who already has the certification and understanding of fortified. You can train existing kind of labor force that you have on how to build a fortified. So it doesn't have to be a formal roofing contractor with the certification. It just makes it maybe easier for you if you find a roofer who's already familiar with it. But from SPP's experience, we trained 2 of our roofing companies. We trained them, that sounds really formal, but we introduced fortified to roofers that we were already using, who prior to, they did not know what fortified was. They had roofing experience. And so we just took the time to kind of introduce this concept and how to meet fortified to them. So did that kind of answer your question?
That's amazing. That's perfect. Yeah, that's really helpful. Covers it.
I think this is Lori with All Hands and Hearts. I work with Rachel. And I think just in general, though, we are also wondering, though, I mean, do other organizations have trouble finding contractors as staff members too? Because we lost one of our construction leads, and it's been difficult. I think it's just kind of the nature of, I mean, one of my friends who are redoing their house, it's going up starting 6 months later than they thought it was going to. It's just everybody is so busy. But how do you guys find your talent pool to be staff members on the construction side? Because when you have a good person, that leads to better practices for the volunteers and everybody working, and we're kind of struggling with that.
Yeah, and I'll say too, from New York's perspective, because we weren't able to train any of our subcontractors, and we didn't have we wouldn't put volunteers up there anyway, but even if we could, we didn't have them to begin with. We had to like really handhold with our one sub that was a solid roofer. And we were lucky at that point, we still had a construction team member. So I'll leave that question on the table for the rest of the partners if anybody wants to answer it. But I know, just as an alternative to what Dulcie was saying too, like if you have a contractor that you can get trained and that we can do this formal training with, then yes, we'll pay for it and like help you with that. And an incentive is that, you know, they have this for future. But also if you don't have that ability and you're just going to try to like kind of push or guide the subcontractors through it, then really the onus is going to be on you as the trained like entity to make sure that they're following the standards. And then you'll work with the evaluator to make sure that it's following that. But I think it kind of can fall into any of those categories. I know, yeah, and we had, I would say, like a 90% pass rate with untrained, like officially untrained fortified roofers, and they still pass most of the time. So just as an alternative idea. Yeah.
Does anyone want to try to, I think the staffing challenge is probably something a lot of us have. It's just like, how do you find skilled people? One, like finding subcontractors who are willing, you can contract with, but then people on your team. Does anybody want to have any kind of best practices or current wins in regards to finding skilled construction people to be on your team?
Like I was trying to establish relationships with like National Association of Home Builders and Associated Builders and Contractors. It's been challenging. And then I've now gone the route of going through educational, like Delgado. I'm working on some stuff because we especially need it in Louisiana, but it's just like such a process, you know?
Yeah, and Lori, I have a few ideas, Lori and Rachel too. I may be able to introduce you to some other people who aren't on this call, but are partners that I think have really good idea of how to find construction staff members. So maybe we just talk about it offline too.
We can take it offline. Okay.
Yeah, I have a
Thank
few
you.
ideas for you. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Angela.
Thanks.
Kevin, your hand's been up for a bit. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, with that one question there, I want to help add a little bit of light to that. Sometimes it helps to, if you know of somebody like Angela will know different people who have fortified contractors who do the job and already know how to. Sometimes if you can get with them, go get on the roof, evaluate what they're doing, see how they're doing it. So whenever you get your contractor and you tell them how, if you can go and at least see that they're doing it properly and tell them how important that is for future work with you, that really helps. But if you don't know what that looks like, then you don't know if they're doing it. So spend a little time, find someone who is doing it properly, see the process, so you know what you're talking about, which will help. The question that I have is for the evaluators. Is there a list of evaluators that you can get us or email to us or something in our area, or at least in our state? And are you looking for more evaluators?
Yeah, so I think in the FAQ that's linked in the Fortified application that Angela sent out, there is a URL to the evaluator database. This is all maintained by IBHS, and you can filter it by your state, and you could search for evaluators, roofers, and what they call professionals. And professionals are typically like GCs or like just general home builders. So you can kind of filter it and like look for folks in your state. And then I know like IBHS is definitely always looking for new evaluators. So if you can't evaluate your own projects, but this could be a good kind of just like service that you or somebody on your team wants to like add to their repertoire of kind of expertise. And so I would encourage anybody on this call or folks on your team who there's specific requirements in order to be an evaluator. If that's something that interests you, I know IBHS is always looking to expand who can provide this service.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move us on because I think the next one is really just kind of getting into more question and answers time. Well, actually, no, maybe we stop here and make sure we do to answer all the questions, because I'm seeing that actually this is my question slide. Angela, did you want to address some of the written questions?
Yeah, Dulcie, I think I added a slide maybe right after
Maybe I need to
general
refresh.
takeaways this morning, last minute.
Yeah, let me see if I can just refresh. So I'll do that while you're talking.
Basically, I mean, I can also just go over it. I'm looking at it too. But yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, just talk about some of the questions that you all asked. So can there be layering? So for instance, can we layer the veteran grant with the fortified grant, which we're going to get to the veteran grant in a minute, but the answer is yes. You can, as long as it's your agency, you know, all hands or restoration team or whoever who has been awarded both grants through SPP, you can use those on the same house. What you can't still do is what I talked about earlier and kind of with all of you at different moments. You can't use the same grant can't be split between two different agencies. So for instance, like Catholic Charities and All Hands can't, both take their veteran grant and put it on the same house. So the veteran grant's $15,000. You can't then have $30,000 on the same house, both through SBP. So that's still a no-go. But if All Hands has veteran grant and the fortified grant, and they want to use it both on the same home for Miss Smith, great, very happy to do that. So I just wanted to be super clear about that. That internal layering of your own grants through SBP on the same house is totally fine. Just got to be super aware of what other funding is coming into that house so that there's no duplication there. Another question that I got a lot, the geography, totally unrestricted. You're all across the US anyway, but anybody, anywhere can apply. There's no restrictions on that for both grants, fortified and the veteran grant. Another question was, is there documentation for what you can provide to the subcontractors? I think we kind of covered that a little bit. A lot of it is just going to be picking out your best roofers, your best contractors, and then having deep conversations with them about the incentives that this is going to provide, not only them, but the homeowners. And hopefully that's something that motivates them. And that this certification then could be something to add to their own resumes that, down the road they can charge extra for this service, and that would be an added benefit to them. So I think it's going to be a lot of initial groundwork of you picking out best contractors, talking them through it, getting some buy-in, and letting them know SBP is going to provide this training for them. So they will have that. Let me see what other questions we had. Geography we covered. Estimates in hand. You do not need estimates in hand. I know you all kind of have different types of grants and applications based on your programs, but for this one, you won't need a specific estimate and home in mind. If you have a general idea of, okay, I have, 50 people in my queue right now, 5 of which are very vulnerable. And we talked about identifying vulnerability last week, but they're most vulnerable. These 5 people really need a brand new roof. Let's do it fortified. I think generally it's going to cost $10,000 per roof. Those are perfect 5 to put in for your application. I know in other grants, folks will come to me and say, I have Miss Smith and Miss Jones, $2,500 each. Here's their estimates and bids. Can we do it? And then sometimes it can work that way too. But for this one, no, it's a bit more generic, or I guess broad is a better way to explain it. I think those were all the fortified questions that I got from everybody after I sent the RFPs, but I will pause and see if I missed anything, if you have technical questions for Dulcie or grant questions for me.
I have one.
Cool.
So the top bullet, are there any restrictions on which disaster they've been impacted by? So do they have to be impacted by a disaster, or could this also be just straight up deferred maintenance? It's an old roof.
Really has to be a disaster. Yeah,
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a declared disaster. It can't be
Okay.
COVID. It can't be COVID, but it can be an undeclared disaster.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
there's no, that's a great question. Thank you. And there's no parameters around what years that disaster has to have been. I mean, I think it's obviously if it's a disaster from, 15 years ago or Katrina, that's going to be harder to prove, but generally within the realm of reasonability. Yeah, good question, Sonia. Thank you. Other questions? And then we'll get to the veteran grant. I know we're a little over time, but okay, well, let's get on to the veteran grant then. I think people are going to have questions about that. So
Skip this one. Okay, go ahead.
okay, cool. And then we'll wrap up at the end and just open it up for other questions too. But so veteran grant, I hope the FAQ helps really understand the grant here. But basically, it's meant for clients who meet all of the eligibility criteria we talked about last week, under 120% AMI, don't have any other means to repair, have been impacted by a disaster. No, there's no geography that is going to, it can be anywhere, whatever. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. And there's no parameters around when that disaster had to be either, but they have to have been impacted by a disaster and also be able to prove that they are an honorably discharged veteran. And that's going to be your DD-214 form, VA card verification. So we want to make sure of that. But then pretty much outside of that, there's not much parameters or restrictions around this grant, which is very cool. You can do ADA mods, that's fine, but you can also just do whatever disaster repairs they need. You can do both if you need to. You can put some portion of it towards a roof, like if the roof is going to cost $10,000, $8,300 of it could be fortified. The remainder can be from the veteran grant, that's fine. So I mean, that's pretty much it. It's a pretty awesome grant. Dulcie and I both were not involved in getting the award for that grant, but we were really excited when we learned about it a few months ago. There was another grant that you all may have heard about with Marley and probably Anya, maybe lots of other people who are no longer here, last year sometime, pre myself and Dulcie being involved. That grant right now is on hold. And I've talked to a lot of you about it, I think, but it's very complicated because it's through HUD. And so we're not 100% sure if we're going to release that at all, but we do have this other veteran unrestricted grant. And so I wanted to make a note of that there, because I know we've all kind of had one-off conversations, but that VHRMP grant was on hold. We'll talk about it 2023, but this is our current veteran supportive program. So I will stop there. Same idea too, don't need an estimate in hand, just a broad idea of the clients that you want to serve. And obviously you've already identified their veteran status and income status. But let me pause and see if there's questions.
Hey, Angela, I have a question.
Go ahead, Paige.
Is there a cap for how many homes we can request or total amount we can request through the veteran grant? Like, I know it's 15 per house, but overall.
Yeah, great question. There is not a cap, but I will tell you that this is not like millions of dollars that we have for the grant. So please be like aggressive and reasonable with your asks so that we can obviously fund as many of you as possible. But again, I think if we get back from everybody that there's this huge need for veteran support, and the same for Fortified, if there's a huge need for fortified roofing and for veteran supportive services, that's okay. That's an okay problem for us to have. We can go back to our funders and try to get additional funds. But obviously, like, I can't promise that. I'm just saying, put in what you think you can reasonably do in the next, I think the grant period is 6 months. So what can you reasonably do in the next 6 months? And if we're able to support you 100%, great. If we can't, because every partner agency we've ever worked with is applying, then we don't have the money for it. We'll figure something out. But yeah, good question, Paige. Thank you for addressing that.
Thank you.
Anything else? We're doing such a good job here with the veteran explanation that nobody has questions. I feel like I got more questions on the veteran grant than the fortified grant. So I'm surprised nobody has questions. No? Okay. Well, then let's just open up the floor. Anything else you guys want to talk about? Any questions for Dulcie or I?
I don't have a question, but both these grants are awesome. Just to say, roofs are and I know I speak for everybody probably on this call, but roofs are an expensive repair, and typically it eats up almost all the money we have allocated for that home. So you can't do anything else. So to be able to have a separate fund for roofs is phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I will say also internally, our grant awards per roof internally is only, I think it's like 3,500. But we made the cap higher per house for all of you. So that makes it a bit more accessible. And I hope that helps. I know that 8,300 is probably not going to do a full roof in most places, but hopefully it gets you close enough that the gap is something you can fill. So that's our hope.
I'm really excited about these grants. And see, we have a situation here where I'm at in Lafayette and New Iberia that got affected by not Ida, but some of the storms that happened right before that, where it come through with wind damage and stuff to roofs. And that's been some of the question for Acadiana Disaster Network. We're down in Ida trying to help them out. And we got people at home, but we didn't know how we could help them because there was nothing available. Now we are going to be able to reach out to them. I'm extremely excited about these, especially veterans hit a high spot on my heart. So I'm really excited about this. Thank you all for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah. And we want to see too that, I mean, most of you, I think all of you have active grant. Well, not all of you, but a lot of you have active grants with us right now. So generally we want those to be wrapped up. And I did kind of do the timing of it so that most of your grants should end before this one or these two start. And that's intentional. We don't want it to just all get blurry and mixed up, but I want to make sure everybody's done with one chapter onto the next grant. That was always easier for me to do it that way. So yeah. Other questions? Other questions? And I will we'll download the whole presentation too with all the links that Dulcie included and send that out too. Obviously the recording, but the links I know are helpful.
Yeah, just a quick question. This has nothing to do with roofs. So I waited to the end. First of all, I'm really excited about the grant programs because roofs are a big part of the restoration team's restoration efforts. But in terms of a lot of the houses we get into, flood mitigation is a big concern. You know, the rising water, and it could just be from a major rain event. And I know a lot of that the mitigation part goes into the hands of the county and the city and whatnot. But we do run into some homes where it's just the grading of the individual property owner's land. Are there any future considerations for funding for something like that?
I mean, we do from time to time get unrestricted grants that are not specific to veterans or fortified or anything. We don't have any of them at the moment, but yeah, I mean, of course, like if we get them, you'll all be the first to know. But yeah, I'm trying to think. We have one more that I'm hoping to send out in April sometime, but it's not unrestricted. So yeah, I don't have any on the horizon that I know of, but we're always trying to get more. And yeah, I'll keep that in mind. A lot of them are pretty specific. They're unrestricted, but they're still like, they need to be like specific repairs in the homes. So I don't know that like land or, I mean, I don't know. I have a group, I'm not sure if anybody on here is from there, but in Eastern Kentucky, they have a problem with mudslides that can like obviously do a lot of damage to homes. And so they have a different grant for like supportive land rebuild to prevent that. But it's like very specific and it's an Eastern Kentucky based grant that has provided that to them. But I don't know of any others that are unrestricted like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, well, I'm gonna say we've gotten to most questions. You all definitely know where to reach me. And we're gonna, yeah, I'll send out, sometimes the recordings take a while to download, I've noticed. So if I don't send this out today, I'll send it out tomorrow. But yeah, you'll have all of this in your inbox tomorrow. And I'll also copy Dulcie too, in case you guys have more technical questions. But really, really appreciate you being here. I hope this was helpful. And Dulcie started by asking everybody to think about one new resiliency measure that they can incorporate possibly into their home building. So maybe something to think about. Last time we talked about, you know, identifying your top 5 vulnerable clients. This time, think about a simple resiliency measure that you can incorporate. So, but we really appreciate your time. So thank you. It's a pleasure to work with all of you and see all your faces. And yeah, until next Thursday. Next Thursday, we're talking FEMA appeals. So we'll be going over how you as an agency, even if you're not involved in the FEMA process, could support homeowners through the appeal because it's so important. Then hopefully it lessens the need for us to fundraise all of this money and for all of us collectively to fundraise all this money if they're actually getting what they're supposed to be getting, which is not always the case. So that will be next week. And I'll keep sending out little articles and things for folks to read if you're interested. But yeah, so thank you. See you all next Thursday and have a good week.
Thank you.
Bye.